our guy John Fanta, right? We always talk to John Fanta about college basketball. Well, John Fanta is also a football guy. Yeah, we all see his rants about the Cleveland Browns, which we loved last year. But Johnny Fanta is now working for NBC Sports, and he was a part of the Peacock coverage, obviously, on Saturday night with Penn State and Oregon and that classic. And then on Sunday, he's on Football Night in America. Our guy, John Fanta, is with us right now to talk some football. Fanta, I love that now we could talk football with you.
I love that we could talk football too, Zach Gelb, and it's been a fun start to the football season because you think about it, and I appreciate you guys having me, and I always love talking with you about anything, but this could be fun. You know, college football right now, as chaotic as the off-season environments are in college sports, is as chaotic as they are on the field, and it's for all the right reasons on the field. I mean, right now, you could make a case for a number of teams that could win the national championship in college football. And we'll get to that, I'm sure, in a moment, because I'll give you my pick right now. But in the National Football League, you think you've got things figured out with Green Bay, and then what do? They go to Dallas, and their defense, which had been fantastic, was terrible on Sunday night. And by the same token, look at the Chargers. You know, the Chargers start undefeated. They look the part of a real contender of a team that you actually can buy. Think again, and they lay an egg at MetLife, albeit against a desperate Giants team. But still, I think it's been a really fun start. And as you know, now October, you kick into October and you got this much wide open. There's some knowns, more knowns in the NFL than college. But right now in college football, holy cow, this sport is extremely fun and open.
And that's the thing. I went into this season with college, and I'm really strict using the word great. Like I'll say, give me a great team. People give me 10. I don't do that. Like Super Bowl contenders, I have 3 in the AFC, 3 in the NFC always. I don't know if there's a great team the last 2 years in college football. And I thought for sure going to this college football playoff format expanding to 12, that it would water down the regular season. There's no question it gives teams landing spots. Like you lose a game, you're not dead. You could even lose 2 games. You just can't lose 3. But the college football regular season was highly entertaining last year. And we're not even technically in October yet. And look how many classic games we've already had this year, John.
I think you bring up a great point there. Let's go with it in this direction. You know, you see the TV selections, and I'm with the NBC crew on Saturdays, and we're looking at the Big Ten, and we're really excited because we're going to have Michigan and USC a week from Saturday. Now look, both those teams, USC would say they should have won at Illinois. The defense could not hang together. They couldn't hold it together. Now, they came back, but, Zach, I thought when they took the lead that they were going to find a way to seal that game up. They did not. But the beauty of college football today is USC is still alive. You know, they win a game like that over Michigan. They go to South Bend and win. Like USC and Notre Dame, October 18th, folks might be thinking, oh, okay, well, it's not Penn State, Oregon. I would argue the contrary. It's going to be a playoff game for Notre Dame. If they lose the game, they're eliminated. If they win the game, all that talk is going to be building. So I like the fact that an 18 to 23-year-old kid can have a bad day and still be alive for the playoffs. Like I think that that's refreshing. What I would say to college football stakeholders is you don't need more than this. You do not need more than the teams that you've got. If you want to go to 16, all right. But then at that point, to me, don't water it down. You go to 24, 28, 32. These proposals, Zach, where like an Ohio State just has to kind of show up to make the playoff. I'm not a fan of that. The games need to matter in the regular season, and I would argue they matter more now than they did. These people who say that the regular season doesn't matter as much, no, I would say it's better for the sport. I think it's better for the networks. And, you know, I know people were whining on Saturday night about how the games were happening at the same time, Alabama, Georgia, and Penn State, Oregon. Here's what I would say back to that. Who's going to complain about great games? You know, those were two, and were they the best played games? Penn State, the team in the fourth quarter versus the team in the first 3 quarters. but they were close games, they were dramatic games, and they were dramatic finishes. And I think that is really productive for the sport, where you don't just single out one or two. You've got a number of different storylines, a number of different quarterbacks, and a number of different coaches. The pressure is still on these coaches every single week. Is there anybody this past weekend who helped themselves more than Kalen DeBoer?
It's a great question, and here's how I would respond to it, John Fanta. Temporarily, yes. And I'm a huge fan of DeBoer. But and this is what I said going into the game. Even if he wins, people in Alabama, right, Tuscaloosa, they're going to have a sigh of relief, right? You rather win than you lose up against Georgia, who now Kirby Smart's 1-7 up against Alabama, and DeBoer's beat them the last 2 years. But it's funny to me how the schedule plays out, where last year was the same time, Alabama, Georgia at the end of September, and then it was the Vanderbilt debacle. Well, next week it's Vanderbilt again for Alabama. So I'm just curious with DeBoer. He needed that win. He got the win after what happened with Florida State. Didn't lose. They beat Georgia. But now it's to show the difference. How are you going to handle it the rest of the way? Because there's no coach in the country that needs to make the college football playoff more this year than Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's no question about that. He's got to make the college football playoff. I would say this, too. It's important that Penn State doesn't allow Saturday's loss to break their confidence factor. I think everybody expects them to be in the playoff, but Zach, you still got to get there. And the Big Ten has gotten deeper here. The Big Ten, Illinois, they're not as bad as the 53-point loss to Indiana. How about Curt Cignetti? With what he lost, to now come back and have one of the Heisman favorites in Fernando Mendoza, and to have a team that they're undefeated. And, they have figured out ways to get it done. On Saturday, they got tested by Kirk Ferentz on the road at Iowa. We had that game on Peacock, so I was able to listen into that natural sound feed. Zach, Iowa City was absolutely roaring during that game. That was a really hard game for Indiana coming off the statement win over Illinois. So right now in college football, there's a number of different storylines. To me, the best team in the country today is Oregon. The best team in the country is Oregon. That team, Dante Moore has an it factor about him. He's helping his stock a ton. That defense is nasty. They swarm the ball. And Dan Lanning, his team plays with the personality that he coaches with. The Ducks finding a way. A lot of teams, they start to unravel on the road in a marquee game and they just lose that game. I love the response from Oregon. They got a real home field advantage. They're going to have Indiana in Eugene in 2 weeks. They are positioned to be right there at the end and to potentially get that first national championship.
Yeah, and it's championship or bust. 2 years ago, right, they're in the Pac-12. They lost to Washington in the Pac-12 championship game. They lost to Washington twice that season. But Lanning was just getting his feet wet last year. How are they going to transition in the Big Ten? Well, they were undefeated in the regular season. They won the Big Ten championship. And then you lose to Ohio State. It wasn't your night. Maybe it was some rust with the 30-day layoff. I don't think anyone was beating Ohio State in that game with the way that they were playing. But, John, we talk about how college football is open. There's no more Nick Saban. And Kirby Smart and Georgia the last 2 years, they're not looking like they're going to be the Alabama, right? That next dominant team that was going to go win 6 or 7 national championships. So there's no face right now in college football. If Dan Lanning gets a championship, I think he becomes the face of college football, because there's some coaches that could win and they're just not fit for like Kirby Smart. He wins, but I don't think he's the face of college football. Lanning has the personality. I mean this in a positive way. And I told this to him once. He's a football psycho when he gets on that sideline. You saw the scream after the game. And Lanning's a guy that he's not afraid to give his opinion, and he's extremely media friendly. If the Ducks win a championship, obviously it's monumental for that university. But for Dan Lanning, he would then become the face of the sport.
He would. And they've got all the resources there with Phil Knight and with Nike. They've got the setup now in the Big Ten, where once they get a kid out there, now I think they're even more open to more kids, because you could say, hey, we're going to travel to the East Coast. We're going to travel to the Midwest. I look at that as a plus. You're not stuck in the corner of the country. You're playing at 10:30 at night all the time. No, they're getting marquee broadcast slots. Their brand speaks for itself, and they've got this flashiness, this personality about them. But the other thing that stands out is Dante Moore has come in. And in a year right now where, let's face it, Gunnar Stockton on Saturday night threw for 130 yards in the entire game. Julian Sayin, he has not been the reason that Ohio State has rolled to this strong start. Their defense has been the reason, and Jeremiah Smith has been the reason. You know, it's interesting because at the top of the country, we entered the season and we said Sayin, Cade Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeier, these guys are going to be, you know, they could be big time. Well, Klubnik is an afterthought now. Nussmeier has not looked particularly good. And Ole Miss, I mean, what Chambliss and Ole Miss did
He's awesome.
on Saturday. And by the way, there's another face. Like, I am all in on the Lane Kiffin hype machine. And if you look at Ole Miss's schedule, now I know the SEC's hard, but I'm looking at this. I looked at this on Saturday, and I think that there's a real path for them when you look at what they've got. They've got Washington State next. Then, Zach, what a mammoth game. You want to talk about the regular season still meaning something in this 12-team playoff setup. Then Ole Miss is going to go to Georgia. And Ole Miss, you know, they could have a loss to Georgia, still make the playoff. If you're Georgia, you're at home. The amount of pressure that's going to be on Kirby that game, where frankly, Ole Miss has had the better offense. And Georgia's defense has really struggled. So Lane Kiffin, you know, he's got Georgia on October 18th. He's got Oklahoma on October 25th. Obviously, the Sooners and John Mateer, that situation, you feel for them because I would have loved to keep seeing Mateer healthy and good, and because I thought that was a really fascinating storyline to this. But yeah, I just think college football is rich with buzz. And, you know, Virginia, who would have thought Virginia would knock off Florida State Friday night? But, like, is Florida State dead? No. They own a win over Alabama. But guess who they've got this week?
Miami.
They've got Miami. You know,
wouldn't that be so? I talked to one of my friends today, who's a Miami fan, and he said, I hate that Florida State lost last week because it would be so college football for Florida State to come on back and then upset Miami this week because no one thinks that they're going to do so coming up this weekend.
Yeah, the ACC is deeper, right? It would appear that it's deeper. It has better teams. Like, I think Brent Key and Georgia Tech are the sleeper in all of this. They could be the sleeper playoff team a la Arizona State, SMU last year. Like, they've got that makeup, and Haynes King is a stud. I mean, that kid can really make things happen. But it's almost like the ACC, by being deeper with some better teams, there's some cannibalization happening now. How is that all going to shake out with this league? And my question in the ACC is there going to be a team not in the conference title game that's good enough to be sitting at home during that title game to say, we still think that we're going to find our way in? We will see. We don't know that. But, Zach, I think it goes back to the original point. Like, by having more access, it makes Ole Miss, Georgia Tech, you know, Arizona State, and the loaded Big 12, Texas Tech, who appears to be improved. They went out and spent the money. It also shows, like, if you're at Texas Tech and you sit down in your athletic offices and you say, we're going to spend, we're going to get after it, we're going to recruit, and we can make it happen. You don't have to be the blue blood name to win in college football and make that playoff. And it also puts pressure on, like, the Kirby Smarts and Dabo Sweeneys of the world have to be looking in the mirror sometimes right now and saying, how do I figure all this out when the playing field has been leveled to a degree?
Let me just get you back to Penn State, and then we'll wrap up with John Fanta. Does a great job, NBC Sports. You can see him throughout the season. College football also was on Football Night in America last night. You look at Penn State. Well, I know Franklin can't win a big game. Drew Aller, people are trying to tell me he's something that he's not. He's a fine quarterback. He's a good quarterback. He just isn't a big game quarterback, and now it's year 3 of him as a starter. But what makes that one so frustrating if you're a Penn State fan, you come out flat. Aller then comes alive in the 4th, but Aller threw the game away last year up against Notre Dame, and then it happened again in overtime with the interception up against Oregon. And I'm curious how he's going to mentally bounce back, because after the game, he just had a blank stare where he looked like he didn't know what hit him. And no one's going to care if Penn State beats UCLA, Northwestern, Iowa, Michigan State, Nebraska, Rutgers. No offense to those teams. They have a stretch where they play Ohio State and Indiana. And if they lose Ohio State and then beat Indiana, you know people aren't going to be freaking out that, oh, Penn State finally got a big win up against Indiana. That Ohio State game is going to be their season. Now, they can still make the playoffs if they lose that, but you know how this works. For Penn State, we know they're good. It was about being great this year, and they showed they weren't ready to be great up against Oregon.
And oh, by the way, the week before the Ohio State game, they have the worst trap game situation in the Big Ten, which is at Iowa. And I'm telling you right now, Iowa is going to continue to sneak up on people because they actually have an offense that can function. Now, we'll see about Gronowski, who went out of Saturday's game. But look, with Penn State, when they get into overtime and they ran, 2 plays to score a touchdown? They ran the ball on both plays. Then we go into double overtime. And when the moment that Penn State picked off the conversion attempt, I thought to myself, Penn State's going to win this football game. Like, that was huge for them. They're going to score, right? Zach, they had the edge. They had worn Oregon's defensive line down, and what do? They call a pass play that, frankly, went right into coverage, and that was exactly what Oregon wanted to see. Oregon did not want to have to defend the run because Penn State, a lot of people were like, well, their running backs didn't do a whole lot on Saturday. If you watch that game as the game went on, Nick Singleton and Kadron Allen were running hard and running at Oregon's defensive line. They weren't always getting 7 or 8 yards, but the 3 or 4 yards they were getting, they were bringing the punch. And then you've got the edge. They went away from that on that play call. And, you do feel bad for Aller. And I know a lot of people say, well, look what he's probably making now in college. Why do you feel bad for him? Because, Zach, clearly, this is not just a Drew Aller problem. This has been happening at Penn State now for a long time, several years. And there's really a dilemma. Like, I think it's probably the program with the biggest dilemma in college football that's a top-tier program. Because they're always going to be at the table. But at what point do you get tired of just sitting at it and knowing that you're farther away from not sitting at it than you are sitting at the head chair?
You know what it reminds me of? It kind of reminds me of like the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like the last 7-8 years, they're good. They're in the playoff, but they don't win the big game when it matters. And I know Tomlin has won a Super Bowl. Franklin has won a national championship. But how many Steelers fans look there and say, what are we going to do with Tomlin, right? If we get rid of him, it could get ugly, but we know we're not going to win another championship with him. That's the same thing with Franklin. You get rid of him, it could get ugly, but you're not winning a championship with him right now.
Yeah, it's interesting, the state of Pennsylvania, because you could argue that for a period of time,
yeah.
But the Sixers were kind of at the table, but were you ever taking them seriously as a title contender? The answer is no. So it's yeah, I think that's just it is you're like stuck in the best level of purgatory that you could be in because Franklin, look, I know Franklin is this figure that a lot of people like have grown to, it's not like he's got this great street cred nationally.
I can't stand him.
Okay. Well, there you go. Your feelings on him right there. And Aller throws that pick on Saturday. I think the emotions, the shots that you saw, it was like, yeah, this is what we do. Like that, the moment that begins to sink in your locker room, and I'm not saying it will, because I want to see how these kids respond. I mean, they got gift wrapped a nice schedule here with UCLA and Northwestern and Iowa coming up here. I mean, they're in position to now recover and then be ready for their next big game, which is against Ohio State. But you do say to yourself, Zach, when is Penn State going to come out in a game? When are they going to come out in a game? And when are they going to be the aggressor? When are they going to go up against a marquee team, take an early lead, and continue to accelerate? When the formula becomes predictable to a point that when you lose a game like that, it's like, yeah, it's not surprising. That's when you wonder, do we have to break this down at some point to get to where we ultimately want to go? And in today's era of college athletics, the people who are supplying the money to these programs and these teams, they want to win a national championship. They don't just want to be hanging around.
John Fanta does a great job for NBC Sports. You obviously know him a ton with college basketball, but it's great to talk some football with Johnny Fanta, whether it's college or the NFL. John, good luck and congratulations on the new venture. We really appreciate the time today.
Thank you, Zach. Anytime. Appreciate you, my friend.